This is a piece of wrought iron. It comes from half of a chain link that was probably used way back in the day to hold a ship or some sort of something. So the cool thing about wrought iron is that inside it has a very interesting grain that almost mimics a really high layer Damascus, and that is because of the way it was made. Before our common mild steel that we have nowadays, we used to have wrought iron, which would be folded multiple times for its impurities. That way we could have a nice, strong, robust steel to use. So we're going to go on ahead and take this old piece of wrought iron chain and we're going to forge it out into some bars so we can do some sandmai.
The trick to being able to forge wrought iron steel is to forge it very, very hot. Because of the way it's made, it has like a grain structure that runs through it, and that is what you see whenever you etch it. Some etch better than others. I know that the ones I've made from this certain chain haven't etched as well as some that I have made previously, and so it just depends on the batch of steel that you get. But because of those grains, it's very important to work it hot whenever you start pressing it. That way you can avoid tear out, because the grains like to separate if they're overworked. And one other thing, they release a lot of scale. As you can see right here, it oxidizes very fast in the forge. I'm not sure if that's just because the forge has so much oxygen in it, or if it's just because it's wrought iron.
Alright guys, so this used to be a chunk of wrought iron chain. Now it is a 1/4 inch wrought iron flat bar. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut two 6-inch sections to use as cladding for our knife. So it'll be 6-inch by just about 2, and we're going to put two pieces of 1/8 inch 1084 in the center. And we're going to forge weld that up together. First thing I do is clean it up. And then I'm going to take the remainder and I'm going to forge a fork. That way I can have a set for turkey carving or ham carving or whatever, a carving set for the kitchen. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and cut our sections and then we'll clean them up. We don't have to clean up the one we're going to be forging, but we do have to clean up one side on the ones that we're going to be using for our cladding.
When prepping and welding up the wrought iron billet, I treat it just like any other steel that I use. It does not need to be welded all the way through, like for example stainless. It welds pretty well under normal conditions. The only thing is to get it extremely hot. That's one thing that it has in common with stainless steel. You have to get it very hot to be able to forge weld it, though it is very forgiving when you forge weld it versus other steels. Thanks to the new forge I have that I made back in August, forge welding this material as well as stainless is a simple matter, because the forge gets so hot that it literally starts just glowing. Though I do need to make a more permanent door for it. Right now I just have it blocked off with some bricks, and with the little bit of gap that I leave open, it's just enough for it to get extremely hot extremely fast. So here I'm working down the steel and I'm hitting it with my 1/4 inch kiss blocks. I'm trying to get it down to 1/4 inch. I think I need to make some 1/8 inch kiss blocks, because as of late I've been using 1/4 inch and it kind of leaves the billet a little bit on the thicker side, and so I end up not being able to grind as much material and having thicker spines, just because of the fact that I don't really want to grind off all my cladding, which is the whole reason why I'm doing this, to have that cladding on the outside. So I definitely need to make some 1/8 inch kiss blocks, though the reality is that the hydraulic press does not work very well. The thinner you get, it just pulls the heat off a lot faster than it needs to be. Here I'm working on the piece of wrought iron that I had left over. This is not the sandmai. I already put the sandmai to the side. I kind of like the shape it was forged into, so I'm just gonna do a cutout from there. And so I'm working down the wrought iron that I had left over, trying to make the stock a little bit thinner and a little bit more narrow so I don't waste too much material, but it starts cracking towards the front part of the billet, so I end up kind of just doing a stock removal on this one as well. In hindsight, I should have just used Sanmai as my fork as well, but I figured it'd be better just to do it like this. So here I'm portioning out my billet. This is the wrought iron Sanmai that I made, and I'm just portioning out what I want for the blade and what I want for the handle portion of it. Before, in previous videos, I had said that I really like to do full tang knives versus hidden tang knives, and that is the reason why I was doing more hidden tangs, because I didn't really feel comfortable making them. And so the best way to get more comfortable with making them, I decided just to make a whole bunch of them and kind of get the feel for it. And now that I have done a lot of those and I'm doing some more full tangs, I've come to the conclusion that I kind of like hidden tangs better. They are a lot easier to make, a lot more forgiving whenever you're trying to do your final hand sand, because you're sanding wood or plastic or something. You're not sanding steel, so it's a lot easier to get a nice clean finish hand sand, where normally you would have the spine of the knife inside of the tang, if that makes any sense. So I'll probably be doing more hidden tangs in the future. Here I'm just kind of drawing out what I think a fork would look like. I really have never made one or even thought of making one, so I didn't really have much of an idea, and so I opted out to just wing it and kind of make what I had in my head. And for future reference, I'm not going to do that again for something like this. I think I'm going to draw it out first and then just transfer it. But had I known better, I would have actually forged it out from a piece of round stock instead of forging out flat stock and then cutting it out from there. And the reason for that is because at 1/4 inch, it kind of leaves the steel a little weak for using wrought iron for forks. Does it work? Yes, but it is a little bit weaker. Had I used Sanmai to do it, it would have been a lot stronger because of the coarse steel in it. But you live and you learn. So definitely in the future, I will be using more robust steel for that. I just figured, since forks are generally made out of mild steel, I figured wrought iron would be fine. But overall, I wasn't happy with the end result. Not to say it doesn't work, it's just not what I want or what I had in mind. One thing I do like about making knives with wrought iron is that since it is essentially a mild steel, or it's an unhardenable steel, it is extremely soft. So it is a lot easier to be able to, grind through hand sand. Because when you think about it, 50% of the knife is wrought iron, while the other 50% is hardenable steel. So the majority or half of the knife is a lot easier to grind and a lot easier to hand sand, especially in this stage when everything is essentially a lot softer. As you can see, I've already kind of pre-drilled the holes, and that is because I used a different drill bit and it was pretty dull, and it kind of just ate at the top layer and then just screeched horribly. So to save you guys from that torture, I just didn't show that, and I opted out just for the newer drill bit that made easy work of it. That's one other thing that I kind of learned in this process, especially in a future knife that I'll show in a future video, where I am making a stainless steel knife and I'm doing a full tang construction. I have a very hard time drilling through the stainless steel, and that is because it air hardens. Even though this stainless steel doesn't air harden that much, it is enough to be able to kind of just wreck drill bits. And I'm pretty sure any maker knows that when you're going through drill bits like crazy trying to make some holes and you're planning to heat treat moments after you make those holes, it kind of ruins the whole plan. So that's why I think hidden tang is always the best bet now, especially for like kitchen knives that don't really require a lot of force. So here is roughly what I have sketched out on this wrought iron. As you can see towards the front part, it kind of is tearing. That's why I stopped forging on it. And I'm starting by making the hole that separates the two prongs, and I'm cutting it out on my bandsaw. Remember, this is wrought iron, so it's a pretty soft material, so the bandsaw makes quick work of it. And from there, I'm just kind of shaping it with my 2x72. Now, in all truthfulness, I don't know what shape I'm doing. I'm just kind of winging it, and I figured that my 6-inch wheel would work pretty good in here, so I just kind of just ground it to the shape of the wheel. One thing that I did find difficult while I was grinding this guy was to be able to get on the inside portion. The outside portion was very easy. As you can see, I have full reaching coverage. But once I tried to get on the inside, it got a little sketchy. Like, it was definitely very, very sketchy, and definitely not something you want to do with one hand. Nonetheless, it worked pretty well. And then I just cleaned it up on my surface grinder. Since the fork is essentially just wrought iron, it can't harden, so I don't need to go through a hardening process for it. So essentially that was my finished grind, and I'm moving to do my handle holes. I'll be using the same 1/4-inch pins as I'm using on the other knife, so I'm using the 1/4-inch to make these holes, and I'm gonna add extra holes just so that I can remove a little bit of the weight of the handle, because the handle material is a little heavy. Not that a few holes remove all that much weight.
Alright guys, so we are out of the temper. The knife is tempered very nicely. It does have quite some warping in there towards the tang. I'm going to try to straighten that out. The edge doesn't look too bad. It does warp towards the tip a little bit. Oh, there you go. You see the big old giant warp. Never mind, I said a little bit. That's a lot of bit. So pretty much we're going to straighten it out and get to our final grind. It is currently Wednesday, the day before Turkey Day, so I'm trying to finish this for Turkey Day, so I got a lot of work to do, and so let's get to it.
As you know, whenever I have a warp, I kind of default to my carbide peen, though in all reality, it doesn't work as well with these kinds of knives that have soft cladding versus knives that do have a full hardened body, I guess I would say. These have the outer cladding that is made of wrought iron, which is a soft, unhardenable steel. So therefore, whenever you're beating on it, it kind of just makes a bigger divot and doesn't move as much. So you kind of have to do twice as much work on it to get it to straighten out as you would a regular knife that is fully hardenable. The grind on this knife was pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I'm just doing a standard flat grind, and I'm going all the way to the back, and you can see right there how my core steel is already starting to pop out. And as always, I grind down the back of my knife and round it over because it helps with food release a little bit. It kind of makes a little bit of a concave instead of just completely flat, and it also helps with the comfortability of the knife in general.
Alright guys, it's time for our handle. So for our handle material, I'm going to be using this opal color. So the reason I'm using this is because I want to be able to make them both the same handle material, so they're pretty much the same set. And to be able to do that, I need enough handle material, and this is the only piece that I have enough of. I could also do black on black, but I don't know how good that would look, so I'm just gonna roll with this. It's gonna be with black pins and black liners, and it should come out pretty nice, especially after the etch.
As I said, I use this material mainly because it's what I have available, that I have enough to be able to do two handles that are the same, but also because I really, really like it. One downside to this material, though, it is very heavy, and therefore it does add quite a bit of weight to the knife versus, let's say, a stabilized wood that is generally heavier than an unstabilized wood, but still on the lighter side if you compare it to synthetic material like this. There are other synthetic materials that are lighter than this, but this one particularly is quite heavy. And if you've ever held a sheet of this or just two scales, you could definitely tell the difference, and you can definitely see that they are quite heavy. And another downside to using this material, which is just kind of like a pet peeve of mine, not really a downside, is that they create a lot of dust when you grind them. The handle material is very soft when it comes to, you know, abrasives. It's not soft like you can dig your finger into it or your fingernail, but it definitely is soft when it comes to abrasives, and so it powders up really fast, and therefore makes a massive mess in the shop and just dust everything in a light blue color. But other than that, its machinability is very nice, and it is a very beautiful color once you do grind it. I have a lot of people comment that my fingers are too close to the blade, and in all honesty they are, but that is where I'm comfortable working. As you can see right here, that's a lot closer. I'm nowhere near it because I'm not comfortable being that close to the blade. So I definitely do pay attention to what I'm doing. I'm not just kind of, you know, distracted while I'm doing that. And now we're moving on to our glue up. As you can see, I'm using a bigger cup, and that is because I'm using a lot more epoxy. In this case, I'm mixing enough for both of them, but since this is a very slow set epoxy, I'm doing it pretty much at midnight, and I will be going to sleep right after this. So by the time I wake up, this is pretty fully cured. It is a 7 to 10 hour cure time, and it starts thickening up at around 45 minutes. So I have plenty of time to work it, and by the time I wake up, it's plenty hard to be able to grind to shape. If I were using any kind of metal pins, I would first cut them off on the metal bandsaw, but since these are G10, they're really soft, so I just grind them off very quickly on the 2x72, which is one of the upsides I like to using G10 pins versus using any kind of metal pins such as brass or steel or stainless steel or copper. They tend to heat up, and that could really affect the epoxy, so I cut them on the bandsaw. But these, they don't really heat up, so I can get away with just grinding them flush very quickly. And I don't know if it's very noticeable here in the video, but as you can see, the table where my 2x72 is on is very dusty, and it's getting very white very fast. So here I was trying to figure out how I was going to bend the forks, and I opted out to bend them to shape on my hand sanding jig and to just use some leather to make sure I don't scuff them up. And as you can see, they're very light taps, so it doesn't need a lot of force to be able to bend them. So that's really one of the reasons why I didn't really like this material once I got to this part of the build. Originally I thought it was going to be enough. That's why I ended up making them out of this material. Moving forward, if I ever use wrought iron again for something like this, I would definitely make it into a sanmai, even if it's very thin in the center, so that it adds a lot of strength but doesn't get rid of the wrought iron outside as much. And as you can see, whenever I do etch it, it doesn't really change as much as the knife did that has the coarse steel, but it does have some interesting patterning. And here I'm at my brother's house, and he's cutting up the turkey using the knife and the fork. Really can't use the fork that much. He wasn't really confident in it, and he said he didn't really like it, and I honestly didn't really like it either. But it did good work, and it definitely carved up this turkey, and it did it while looking very nice, which is something I like to say. These knives are a luxury, they're not a necessity. You can very much do this with any knife, but it's nice having a nice, good looking knife to do it with. Overall, I'm very happy with the knife. I wasn't very happy with the fork, but this knife is for sale if you want to pick it up. I am not selling the fork since I wasn't very happy with it, but if you buy the knife and you send me a message on the website or on my email at jpsbladeworks@gmail.com and tell me you want the fork, I'll throw it in there for free. If you don't, I won't throw it in there for free. I'll just keep it. But overall, it was a very fun build. And if you liked the video, be sure to like the video. And as always, guys, thank you very much for watching. I greatly appreciate y'all. And I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.